Good afternoon, friends, and welcome to another installment of Golondrinas Live Sessions. I'm Laura Gonzalez, the Education and Volunteer Manager at El Rancho de las Golondrinas, Santa Fe's premier living history museum. We're located out here in the beautiful and historic La Cienega Valley. Now, before we get started today, so that you all have the best audio possible, please make sure to turn up not only your devices, but also check the volume within the live video box itself as well. Today we have a very special program. We're coming live on site. It's a little windy out here, but albeit a beautiful day in March in New Mexico. And our program today is going to be about the art and traditional process of wool dyeing using natural ingredients. And joining us today to share her expertise on that is Las Golondrinas volunteer, weaver, and wool dyer, Cathy Greco. If you have any questions at all for Cathy during this presentation, please go ahead and put those into the comments and we'll answer those at the end of her talk. Thank you so much. And without further delay, it's my pleasure to introduce Cathy.
Thank you. Well, welcome to the Las Golondrinas dye shed. What I would like to share with you today are three types of dyes that would have been used by the Spanish colonials back in that time. We'll be using indigo, we will be using cochineal, and we will also be using chamisa. And what I would like to do first, is talk about how to prepare the wool for dyeing. We have a solution in a pot over there where we add cream of tartar and alum to water, and we put in the fiber to that. And what that does is it opens up the fibers so that the dye can get into the strands of yarn. The first thing I would like to do was show you how we make indigo dye. And I thought this is kind of a fun one. To make the indigo, you have to make a slurry. Indigo is not soluble in water, does not dissolve. So I will pour this into the dye pot. Now, if I just put my yarn into the dye pot with just the indigo and the washing soda, you would not get good color. The indigo is a special dye. It has to be added to a solution where you drive the oxygen out of the water. Now, to do that, we use a compound called spectrolite. The Spanish colonials did not have spectrolite, so what they did, they would collect the urine of young boys and put that into the pot, and you'd have the same effect. It would drive the oxygen out of the water. And so I will add spectrolite. I have to wait a bit because it takes a while for this to get going. So I'll get these stirring. Hopefully our fire will stay. Okay, well that's cooking and we can wait for that. I would like to talk about the other types of substances that were used for dyeing. They have analyzed old rugs and blankets from the Spanish colonial times, and they found that they almost exclusively used chamisa as their yellow dye. Chamisa is a flower. Some people probably know it also as rabbit bush, and it gives a glorious color. Now we're using dried chamisa because it blooms in the fall, and when we do this dye, when we use the dye shed here in the fall, we actually use, I go out in my backyard, I have a whole yard full of chamisa, pick the flowers, bring them down, and we do them right away. And you get glorious yellows. So my yellow today may not be quite as strong as what you would expect. This particular ball of yarn down there was dyed with chamisa about probably 2 years ago. And you can see the color has remained as strong as you would hope. All right, let's see if I can get some of these. I've had a couple of these sitting in here. In the chamisa, I started this chamisa, I soaked it last night, and we actually got quite a good yellow considering that this is dried chamisa. So I'm very pleased. Now you may say, why there's all these bits of chamisa flour all over it. Well, when it's dry, most of that will shake off, and then we can rinse it off also, which is something else we would do. So we'll just let those cook over there. Now the next dye that was used, very expensive dye. This is Cochineal. It's imported from Mexico, and it was very expensive. And you can imagine somebody coming up the Camino Real carrying Cochineal on his back or having it on a burro and hoping that they would not get robbed and have their supply lost. It was so expensive that the only people that were able to wear it were the ones that were quite wealthy. So if you saw people in Spanish colonial times with red or yellow or blue clothing, chances are they were quite wealthy and had a source of the cochineal or the indigo. Cochineal actually is a bug. I don't know whether you can see this or not. That it lives on prickly pear cactus. It's a parasite. And if you've been in like southern Arizona or Texas and seen prickly pear cactus with a fuzzy coating, the cochineal bugs are under that. Down in Mexico and in South America, they actually have greenhouses where they hang paddles of Castile de Nepal, which is a type of prickly pear cactus. They hang those up and inoculate them with the cochineal bugs. They only collect the dead females, which is kind of nice because it makes it a renewable resource. The females lay their, they mate with the males, they lay their eggs, and then they die, so they collect the dead bugs. The Spanish thought that they were rocks of some kind because they have kind of a shiny coating to them. And when they discovered that this made this glorious red dye, they would take it back to Europe, and they made almost as much money selling cochineal to people as they did with gold and silver. So you can imagine how impressive it was. What we do is we grind the cochineal bugs up. If you have a mortar and pestle or a mate mano, you can grind it up and then just add it to your pot with the water. It's very nice because it doesn't need anything else added to it. It is pH sensitive, which means depending on how acidic or basic your solution, your water is, it will actually change the color. Now the water out here in Las Golondrinas and in New Mexico tends to be on the alkali side, basic. So to make sure that it is acidic enough and gives us a nice red color, we use lemon juice or lime juice. The Spanish colonials would use the urine of the young boys because it would be acidic enough to cause the cochineal to go red. So I have had some in here cooking. Oh yes, our indigo is working great. I've had some cochineal in here cooking, and let's see if I can get it out. And you can see it gives you a really nice red color. We were very successful today. I want to bring it around here. Don't want to mix my colors up. And this color will stay. In fact, I've seen clothing with cochineal on it that's probably 400 years old, and it still was the same color as what we are getting here today. Let's see if I have any more in here. Eh. There we go. So we have another one. Now you may say, well, how do you get a darker color? Well, you can use a darker wool. And we've done that. One of these, I think, is, yes. I don't know if you can see the difference in the darker here. The one I used kind of a gray, and the other one I used the regular white yarn wool. And you can get different colors, different shades of the red. I do have a couple more in here. Yeah, these little ones. This is for colcha. And the people that do the colcha are very excited to get these good colors to use on their, when they're doing their colcha embroidery. All right, let's see how our indigo is doing here. It's got fuzzy, that's the oxygen leaving the water. See if we can get this settled down. And the water, you saw when I put in this, it was a nice blue color. Well, now the water has become kind of an interesting green. The thing about the indigo, you need to drive, as I said before, you need to drive the oxygen out of the water. And then when you put in your yarn, it will be that interesting green. When we pull it out, it will actually change color in the, as it hits the oxygen in the air. So cross your fingers and let's see if we have a good batch here. We got all this fuzz. Oh yes. I don't know whether you can see. It's kind of a greenish color. Well, let's just wait and see what happens. And it should start getting darker. Yes, it's starting to get darker on the top. And as it sits, it will get more and more blue. Now, suppose you were making a rug or blankets and all. If you are using a lot of cochineal or a lot of indigo, you would have to dye everything all at the same time. Because if you don't, you will end up getting different colors of yarn when you want it all the same. So every dye, it's like a dye lot if you knit or anything. You have to make sure you get the right thing. So we'll let that sit, and it will hopefully get darker. Now we ought to stick another one in here. It's fun. All right, let's try one of these little ones and see how this works. Again, they like having these for the culture work. Let's see if we can get this to... And it comes out green. And it should start turning blue. It's very exciting. It's one of my favorites to watch. And again, indigo is imported from Mexico. It's a what's known as it's a subtropical plant. It does not grow up here in New Mexico, so that's why it had to be brought up here along with the cochineal. So if you could have clothes of those two, then you were pretty excited. You know, you were rich and had lots of good things to wear. All right, excuse my paper here. Okay. I think that probably I've shown everything that happens with these. In front of us we have several examples of different substances. Let me get something to point with here. The rug, this is all indigo dyed, and this was done by a gentleman from Mexico, Bumaro. This is all cochineal dyed, and you can see the different colors. The indigo, you would change it by how concentrated your solution is. The cochineal, you would do it by changing how the pH of your solution. Either make it more basic or make it more acidic. The third rug over on the table It just shows you some of the different colors that can be used. Here we have chamisa, and then this is chamisa and indigo together, and it gives you a green. In fact, that's a question a lot of people have. How do you get green? Well, green, there's a couple of ways. One way to get green is using indigo and chamisa. Of course, you think about that, it's going to be a little expensive because you're using one of the expensive dyes. But you can get lovely greens. It depends on which direction you dye. If you dye the yellow first, the chamisa, and then put it in the indigo, you get more of a forest, darker green. If you go the other way, or if you dye with the indigo first and then over dye with the chamisa, you get more blue-green kind of greens. Now, you may ask why don't you just mix the two together? Well, they just muddy up. They're not like paint. You have to over dye. So it's kind of a game. Let's pull our indigo back. Now you can see that this has gotten darker since I put it in, took it out. And my big one is much darker. So you can see it's really kind of fun what you do with your dye things. The nice thing about indigo is you do not actually need the mordant. Now, we have the mordant because we morded in all the yarn, but indigo would work just with straight, without a mordant. Okay, I think I've covered everything. Does anyone have any questions? Oh, in fact, I know what, something that's very interesting is some dyes, you may think, hey, why not use prickly pear cactus to get red? Well, a friend of mine did prickly pear cactus, got red. 6 months later, it had turned gray. And a perfect example of this is this bag that I made. This gold here was actually red hibiscus flowers, and a friend tried to make dye with it. She brought it to me, and it was this muddy yellow. It was terrible looking. It actually has improved over the years. This bag's probably like 12 years old now. The other colors on it, here's the chamisa. If you put chamisa in an iron pot, you can get some green, and you can see some on the other rug over there. Problem is the Spanish colonials would not have used an iron pot because they would have used that for cooking and all. Now, also on the blue rug, I have some orange. Those two little skeins there were dyed with madder. And madder can also give you a red. The problem is with that is you have to use arsenic to get it to work. And one of my favorite pictures is a picture of a colonial or British army where you have the captain in front, and he can afford the cochineal. And his coat just is brilliant red. Brilliant. And then his men, the soldiers behind him, their coats were dyed with the madder and arsenic. And it's kind of it's red, but it's kind of a dull red, and I'm not sure I'd want to wear a coat that has arsenic in it. It's pretty bad. So I think I've covered everything today. Does anyone have any questions? No question? We have questions?
I'm going to rejoin you here, Cathy,
Okay,
so we can field any questions that you have coming through on the feed here. We had a question. That's a great question because I had the same thing. My favorite color is purple. How do we make purple?
Well, there's a couple of ways to make purple. One way is if you take cochineal and indigo and over dye, you can get purple. But think about the price. You're using two of the most expensive dyes to get your purple. So that's one reason why purple was very expensive. Also, if you put cochineal into an iron pot, and as I said, they did not use iron pots for their dyeing, that'll give you purple. And also if you make it basic, if you add a lot of my washing soda here, you could probably get some kind of a purple. And yeah.
So interesting. So if you're wearing purple, you're sort of telling everybody around you that you can afford to over dye your clothing. How interesting. What about flowers? I see something here about somebody mentions lavender. Are there any flowers that you can use in the dye process?
The yellow flowers, as I had said before, the red prickly pear cactus, but red flowers and blue flowers they may give you a color for a bit, but it's ephemeral and it will fade over time. So they're not very useful with that. However, yellow flowers, for some reason, they work. This piece I had said earlier, it's an example of chamisa. It actually is snakeweed, another plant that we have a lot around here. And it gives you the same type of yellow as the chamisa dyed. Marigolds can give you color. What else can, Mexican sunflowers. So the yellow flowers tend to work. I have used hollyhocks. Now I noticed that one did kind of fade. It didn't give quite as good a color, but these other things do give you that glorious yellow. You can also use Osage orange bark, but they would not have had that because we don't have Osage oranges trees here in New Mexico.
Interesting. So you're talking about yellow here. Am I correct in assuming that because indigo and cochineal would have been an imported good, that majoritively speaking, the clothing and items of fabric and wool would have been primarily yellow here in New Mexico?
Well, they may have been yellow, and you also can use the natural colors of the sheep. You can get brown. The Toro sheep we have here, you have brown, and down there you have white and gray, and we also occasionally have a black sheep, which black is very unusual because a lot of times the black will fade in color, but they would have probably used those colors, and I suspect, they may have used some of the yellow just for a little brightness. And maybe the madder, because madder you can grow here.
And that's what we love about the churro sheep here at Las Golondrinas, right? All of our weavers rave about those girls because they come in all those different colors. What about, we're looking at these really rich reds, and I think about something like a chili ristra, a red chili powder. I know that stains my clothes when I'm cooking. Is that something that would have been used as a dye here in New Mexico?
Well, think about it. Chilies, you can use onion skins. The problem with those are, in Spanish colonial times, you can't just run down to the store and buy a whole bunch of onions or a whole bunch of chilies. You are eating what you grow, so it's not available. You would have kept those things as food. So that's why the non-edible compounds were used for dyes.
Makes perfect sense. There's some cochineal brewing over here, and I have to tell you folks at home, it doesn't smell very good.
The indigo.
Or the indigo, yeah. The chamisa does, though. Let's see, do we have any other questions from our audience here? Any other questions or comments for Cathy? I think you covered it all. All right. Well, thank you so much again, Cathy, for coming out today to Las Golondrinas to share your expertise on wool dyeing. For you folks at home, whenever you get to come and visit Las Golondrinas again, this isn't a demonstration that we have all the time. It's a very special demonstration that we do at certain times of the year during certain festivals. But make sure to pay attention. We'll let you know when this is going to be part of an event so that you can come down and see this in action down in the dye shed. It's quite an interesting and beautiful process. And Cathy, you were talking about some of these smaller strands of wool here and how excited our culture artists are going to be to receive those. So that's a good opportunity to tell our viewers that the next Golondrinas live session is going to be on Friday, March, I believe it's the 26th. In the afternoon. We'll release a little bit more details about those. It'll likely be around the same time in the afternoon. Keep up with our Facebook and our Instagram, and we'll let you know. But one of our colcha artists, Julia Gomez, who's been on this program before, is going to come and share her lovely expertise. I'm sorry? Minerals. Oh, yeah, good question. We have somebody wondering about minerals. Are minerals used in dyeing?
Not the Spanish colonials did not use it. Over in Europe, I know they used minerals in some of the paints. Some of the artists used that. But again, I don't think you can get very good color with it. not like the vibrant colors that we get here with the organic compounds.
Yeah, this is wonderful. All right. Well, if there's no more questions for Cathy, again, thank you, viewers, for spending a little time with us on this Friday afternoon. Thank you so much, Cathy, for sharing your expertise and for coming out. This is a lot of work, everybody, so we really appreciate our volunteers that come out and help us put on these Golondrinas live sessions. Remember, these videos stay right here on our Facebook page. They also get uploaded to the Las Golondrinas channel on YouTube. For all things Golondrinas, visit us at SF Golondrinas, Facebook, Instagram, golondrinas.org. We'd love to hear from you. We are excited to join you for our next Golondrinas live session. Wishing you all a very safe and happy weekend. Thanks so much.